Askreddit. What paranormal activities have you witnessed? Not sure if this is considered paranormal, but when I get fevers as a child, I would always, in my fugue and pain-infused state, hear a man counting in a very deep voice. He would count from one and up. As the numbers get larger, the voice gets louder and more intense. It started to get less frequent as I grew older, and now I do not experience it anymore. I've brushed it aside as a recurring nightmare until only recently. I've learned that my sister would experience the exact same thing when she was younger as well. It's not the scariest thing, but it does send shivers down my spine trying to comprehend this. When I would get fevers as a kid, I would hear what sounded like a room full of people all talking at once, but I was hearing them from down the hall and behind a heavy door, if that makes sense. Like the buzz of conversation without being able to make out any of the words. Always creeped me out. It's so weird you say this. My husband had a very bad illness in his third world island country as a child and technically did die for a couple minutes. The fever was so intense that the doctor told my mill to prepare to call for a cremation soon. After he died, he suddenly came back with a gasp, and everyone around him was so shocked, his mother nearly fainted. A couple days later, he was feeling well enough to tell them what he remembered and experienced. He said a tall man in white was counting loudly in his ear, then the counting just stopped. Then the counting started going backwards to 1 again. That's when he woke up. That's about 60 years ago now. I work in a cemetery. One evening I had stayed late to do some catch-up work. I was taking pictures of some granite samples to have on my phone and had already locked up. I was alone. As I was holding my phone, I heard the doorway to the basement swing open, slam shut, and heard footsteps go down the stairs. I froze. I thought for sure someone had come in. I called out to see if it was someone from maintenance. No reply. I got scared because if it wasn't them, someone had broken in. I stayed still for a bit and listened, then called out again. Nothing. Finally I got brave enough to look. No one there. I peeked down the basement, empty. All the doors were still locked. I went with my best friend during high school for summer vacation to his grandparents who live in the countryside in Japan. I stayed in his mom's old room, which has a small wall closet. Just above this closet was a smaller closet door, like 1.5 feet tall and about 3 feet wide, just above it. Weird design, but their house is old. The first couple weeks, I was pretty jet-lagged and Japan is hot and humid, so I didn't really sleep at night. If my light was off at night though, I always felt uneasy about that small closet space. Something about it just felt darker than the rest of the room. Toward the end of the second week, I started to adjust to the time difference. One morning, I woke up and that small door was open. It was unsettling, but I closed it and just thought maybe it wasn't closed all the way and came loose. A couple nights later, I woke up feeling uneasy. It was dark and I could kinda see, and I could see that small door was open. It was much darker than the rest of the room, like black, pitch dark. This was the first and only time I experienced paralysis. I was too scared to move, say, or do anything. I just felt this darkness coming from there. I don't remember sleeping that night, but I must have, because I remember waking up the next morning. I told my friend about it, who said his mom told him about something like that, too. When we got back home, and I talked to his parents, his mom kinda joked with me, "So, I heard you met the ghost." When I was 6 I slept on a bunk bed in a room alone. The bottom bunk was empty, was meant for my younger brother, but he was too scared of sleeping in a bed alone. So I was alone in that room that night. I remember a chilling feeling that night, then it suddenly got really warm, probably because I was undergoing a night terror of some sort. Then I start breathing heavily and open my eyes and see the room is empty. My little night light in the corner of the room comforts me back to sleep, Except as I closed my eyes I felt a heavy hand petting my shoulder, my eyes rip open and there was no one in the room. As soon as I lay back down the petting continued and I covered my head just pretending to myself that it was my mom. It took me 12 years to stop sleeping with my head under the covers because of that memory. My mom, of course, knew a woman passed away in that apartment before we moved in, so she always believed it was that woman trying to comfort me. One weekend, I was at my dad's house. He'd come to the upstairs bathroom to get a shave and heard footsteps in my stepsister's room. I thought it was him walking around initially, so I got up to find him standing at her closed door. He looks back at me and whispers, "You can hear that too, right?" I nodded and he opened the door slowly. My stepsister was asleep, and never had been awake apparently. There was no way she could have crossed the room, gotten in bed, and pretended to be that convincingly asleep in the 2 seconds it took my dad to open the door. He went in, checked her TV which had never been on. She had one of those big ones from the 90s that would get warm when turned on. The radio hadn't been on either, figured maybe it was the beat of a song or something. After that, we heard the footsteps a bunch of times, usually very early in the morning. Some of the footsteps were so heavy, they'd shake the ceiling fan of the dining room directly under her bedroom, and they'd woken her up a few times as well. Whenever I'd shower at my dad's, I always felt like someone was standing behind me. Eventually, I got so stressed and paranoid that I refused to shower at the house or even go into the upstairs bathroom. My dad asked me one day, "Do you ever feel like someone's in the shower with you when you're here?" After months of me feeling that way and never mentioning it to anyone. My dad was in hospital with a serious brain tumor. The hospital was about 40 miles from me and he was in no shape to even keep awake. One night I was chatting to a friend on MSN, them days, yup, and he asked how my dad was. I turned to my left and I saw him sat in his chair just looking at me. I replied, "Think he's okay." Sat in the room with me, to which my friend said, "Isn't he in hospital?" I looked again and nothing. I never mentioned it to anyone, told my friend I must have been seeing things. Dad survived and still here today. Cut to about 21 years later and I met up with my dad and just having a chat. He says, "Something been on my mind for years, son, and can't shake it off. When I was in hospital, I remember been at home sitting in my chair, you was on the computer and you looked at me. Then I woke up in hospital, but it felt too real to be a dream." That's when I told him my experience. At my mom's old apartment I used to have this feeling I was always being watched. Then I was starting to wake up at 3 a.m. consistently. On one of the nights I had woken up I heard someone call out my name. It was a woman's voice but I didn't recognize it. She kept calling out my name and walking towards my bed, getting closer, but I didn't see anything. I freaked out, jumped off my bed, and ran into my brother's room. I hopped into bed with him and tried waking him up. The punk sleeps like the dead, he still sleeps like that. I heard her footsteps follow me until his doorway. After that, every time I woke up in the middle of the night I just ran into his room and slept on the top bunk. We had bunk beds. My mother still doesn't believe that happened. Thankfully we only lived there for a couple of months then moved out. A similar thing happened to me when I was a teenager. I began waking up every night around 3 a.m. feeling like something was about to hurt me. It was just this awful, knotted dread sitting in my stomach. My dog would often also wake up, hackles raised. There was a bathroom attached to my bedroom that I believe was the source of it. It had the worst energy. I always refused to use it. No matter how many times we changed the bulbs or tried to fix the wiring, the lights always flickered this ugly green color. The shower in it had a sliding door. Sometimes, when I would awaken at night, I would hear the door rattling in its frame, hard. The AC had not kicked on, and the fan was not on. It only ever happened around 3 a.m. I would lie awake, staring at the bathroom door, waiting for it to slide open. Fortunately for my sanity, it never did. The shower door rattled alone in the dark bathroom, slamming against the sides of its track, but the bathroom door itself stayed shut. I don't believe in paranormal activity, but my grandparents' house is considered by many to be extremely haunted. It's part of a tour of haunted houses in the LA area, and according to legend was part of the inspiration for American Horror Story. There are tons of stories, but the one I experienced myself was when I was living there as a child. I was about 6 and my older sister was 12 and we shared a room. My mom had decorated our bedside table with an antique telephone that didn't work and was not plugged in. My sister and I were asleep, and for some reason we both woke up at the same time and turned to face each other. I remember feeling an extreme feeling of dread. Then the phone rang in between us. We locked eyes and both hid under our blankets till it stopped ringing. We both thought it was a dream because we didn't say anything for years about it. Then one day she was talking about it and we realized we had had the exact same experience. There are so many more stories, but that's the only one I experienced directly. My brother was on the phone once with his GF when she started saying that she could hear some old lady asking my brother for a glass of water. There was nobody around him, so he ignored it, but she kept on insisting. He hung up the phone and went to check on our grandma, who was in her bedroom, and found her dead. Fast forward a couple of years, around 11 p.m., I was on the phone with a girl when I saw a guy on a bicycle go past. Phone was by the windowsill. Same spot as my brother. That's when I noticed she stopped talking and asked her if she was still there. She apologized as she thought I got into trouble. I said no and asked why she said that, and she replied with, "Someone was telling me to stop talking on the phone, it's late. Go to bed." I was on my own, everybody in the house was already asleep. I asked her if it was an old lady and she said yes. Told her it's my grandma and that the same thing happened to my brother. She started talking about ghosts and stuff, so I told her I'm hanging up and bolted into my room. I'm an engineer that works on renovating/remodeling large Victorian-era UK buildings into apartments and hotels. I was working on the renovation of a large 1800s built abandoned hospital in North England which treated the poor for free with homeopathic remedies. I was surveying the 5th floor alone, which was the old children's ward, when an old wooden child's wheelchair just moved towards me as though it was pushed. It rolled across the floor from one side of the room and hit me, not hard, from the side. I knew something wasn't right but told myself to ignore it as I'm not easily spooked. On that same project, to access the basement you had to go down a tight enclosed spiral staircase. Something just didn't feel nice about going near that room with the staircase, but we had to go down to do some modifications to the building's foundations. I had a team of 4 men with me, all professional contractors who wouldn't fright easily. Nobody wanted to be the first down simply because of the bad feelings. Aside from one of the guys laughed and said we were all being soft. He went in the room, turned and went to take the first step down, and I 100% saw him get pushed by something invisible. He fell down the full flight of stairs, then screamed, got up and ran out. He didn't come into work the next day and we never heard from him again. This site was approx a £50 million redevelopment and work practically stalled because nobody would go into the basement after that. It was about 1 to 2 months before I found a couple of PPL on site willing to go into the basement with me. When we did, I was shocked. The basement had one room with just a large concrete slab top table, about 7 feet by 7 feet and 1 foot thick, in the middle, and a large bricked up/blocked off tunnel coming off one wall. Turned out the slab in the center of the room is where they used to store the bodies of PPL with highly infectious diseases, and the blocked off tunnel was a secret underground passage to the cathedral 1/4 mile away. I've since been told they chose to keep the bodies of these unfortunate people out of sight from the public during transportation to the cathedral, as opposed to horse and cart on the roads, to hide just how badly disfigured and disease-ravaged they were. I haven't posted to try and sway anybody that might read this towards believing. It's simply my account of what I've seen, witnessed and experienced on one construction site I cannot forget. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe for more videos like this.